www.vintagegamer.com.
Today we're going to take a look at an early release from Rare. Rare, the famous Nintendo developer. I'm sure all you Nintendo fanboys know Rare. They need no introduction. But this was probably their second big hit. The first one being Wizards and Warriors, also for the NES. And RC Pro-Am. This is a game that kind of turned racing games at the time a little bit on their head. It was a big hit. It might not be in anyone's top 10 list for their 10 favorite NES games, but if you were to tell them to make a list of 15 or 20, it would certainly be in there. And it just was and still is an all-around fun game. It's been out for 28 years. It's still fun. It's still challenging. And before we get too far into RC Pro-Am, let's take a little bit of a look back at the history of racing games in general to understand how we got to this point. So back in the mid-1970s, what's widely regarded as the very first racing game is a game called Grand Track 10. And if you look here, it's you got a wheel, you got a shifter, and that's about it, of course. And it's an overhead view, also like like RC Pro-Am. And this was kind of it. It wasn't that different graphically like something from Asteroids. It was just a black screen, white objects on the screen of monocolor, and that was it. And you just navigated your car around in between the lines, which is obviously the track. Had to use your imagination a little bit. In the early 1980s, things changed a little bit. We had first-person racing games. The most influential of all of those, possibly the most important racing game of all time, is Pole Position. And that was it wasn't the first-person racer. That credit goes to a game called Turbo, but Turbo sucked. Pole Position was the first good one. People were jamming quarters in this machine left and right. On top of the first-person novelty and all that, it also had a real-life racetrack, Fuji, out in Japan. If you're a Formula One fan or race fan in general, you've heard of that track. So from here forward, even Nintendo's own Mach Rider, Rad Racer, everything was first person. Nobody was doing overhead racers anymore. Until Rare decided to go do their own thing. Enter 1988 and RC Pro-Am. When Classic Game Room reviewed this game back in 2010, Mark over at Classic Game Room, he described it as kind of like being the Mario Kart of its day. And I'm sure you all know who Mark at Classic Game Room is. If you're watching my channel, you've definitely seen Classic Game Room videos. But, I think he's right. This wasn't multiplayer, but even the first Mario Kart wasn't more than 2-player. And it was a little quirky. It was really fun. Like, everybody played the game. You could pick it up in 2 seconds and play it, but it took you a long time to master it. It might be cutesy with the little radio-controlled trucks and everything, but there's some serious level memorization involved. You don't really see much of what's coming up, and there's some very serious level memorization involved. These races are also incredibly tight. That makes them very challenging if you're paying attention. You can be in first and go back to third, or be in fourth and jump up to second or first very, very quickly. The margin of victory on these races is not much at all. Just right there, I dropped from first to fourth in one turn. It's amazing. That makes this a very challenging game, and it makes it very fun. This game also has the cool upgrades, get better tires and a better motor and a turbo and whatnot, which is all cool stuff. I don't think this was the first game to have that, but pretty typical for the era. And just nobody had done an overhead, this kind of isometric point of view perspective in a long time, and I think that's partially why it was a hit. And really, on something like the NES, none of the first-person racers, even Rad Racer, I don't really think it's that good. That's just me. And you know, this is a way of producing a quality and fun racing game. Rare really knocked it out of the park here. Wizards and Warriors had already put Rare on the map, but to follow up a game like that with RC Pro-Am is you know, just fantastic. Totally different genre, different dynamic altogether, and you know, we all know Rare makes good stuff, and that was certainly true back in the 80s as well. I actually didn't have RC Pro-Am as a kid. I'm sure I rented it many times and I played it at friends' houses and stuff, but I was more familiar with the Game Boy version, Super RC Pro-Am. Great Game Boy game, by the way. I highly recommend it. You can use that Game Boy Link cable to play with friends, so that one actually is multiplayer. But you know, we have a new classic gaming store in town where I live, and this thing was on the shelf for $9. I bought it. I know I severely overpaid compared to what I could have paid on eBay. But you know what? I didn't mind. I don't mind helping out local business. But beyond that, this is a fun game. It was well worth the $9. It's just fun. It really holds its entertainment value here 28 years later. That is going to do it for this episode of VintageGamer.com. If you found this review mildly entertaining, be sure to subscribe because there is lots more where that came from. If you're feeling generous, throw me a like because that really does help me out. And I'll be back in a couple days with a review of something else. Sit, Dick, sit. Good cat.